The rain hammered against the windshield of Daniel Rivers' black Lamborghini as he sat stranded on Pine Street. Steam rose from under the hood of his $250,000 car. And for the first time in years, his wealth couldn't solve his immediate problem. The 20-year-old CEO of NovaTech Solutions pulled out his phone, but the screen showed no signal bars. Perfect, Daniel stepped out into the downpour. His expensive Italian suit immediately soaked through. He had been driving aimlessly through downtown Seattle, trying to clear his head after another exhausting board meeting where investors questioned his latest decisions. Building a tech empire at such a young age came with constant pressure, and tonight he just needed to escape the suffocating world of corporate expectations. As he lifted the hood and stared at the smoking engine, a gentle voice behind him made him turn around. "Excuse me, do you need help?" Daniel found himself looking at a young woman, probably in her early 20s, holding a colorful umbrella over her head. She wore simple jeans and a worn denim jacket, her long black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Despite her modest appearance, there was something striking about her kind brown eyes and genuine smile. "I don't think there's much anyone can do," Daniel replied, gesturing at his car. "This thing is more computer than engine, and I'm definitely not a mechanic." The girl stepped closer, peering at the engine with surprising confidence. "Actually, I might be able to help. My name is Chen, and I work part-time at Rodriguez Auto Shop when I'm not in art classes. Mind if I take a look?" Daniel was skeptical, but desperate. "I'm Daniel. And honestly, at this point, I'll take any help I can get." Emma handed him her umbrella and rolled up her sleeves. As she leaned over the engine, something caught Daniel's eye that made his heart stop. Around her neck hung a delicate gold locket with intricate engravings. A piece of jewelry he recognized instantly because it had belonged to his mother. His breath caught in his throat as memories flooded back. That locket had been his mother's most treasured possession, passed down through generations of women in his family. She had worn it every day until her death when Daniel was 16. After the funeral, his father claimed it had been lost, and Daniel had spent months searching for it with no success. "There's your problem," Emma announced. Interrupting his shocked thoughts, she pointed to a loose connection near the radiator. "This hose came free. It's not a big fix, but you'll need to let the engine cool down first." The overheating triggered a safety shutdown. Daniel barely heard her words. His eyes remained fixed on the locket. "That's a beautiful necklace," he managed to say, his voice slightly hoarse. Emma's hand instinctively moved to touch the locket, a protective gesture. "Thank you. It belonged to my adoptive mother. She said it was very special, that it came from someone who once meant the world to her." The rain continued to fall around them as Daniel struggled to process this information. How could this stranger be wearing his mother's locket? His mind raced with questions, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Your adoptive mother?" he asked carefully. Emma nodded, her expression growing somewhat sad. "Mrs. Helen Torres took me in when I was 12. My parents died in a car accident, and I had no other family. Helen has been everything to me since then. She gave me this locket on my 18th birthday and told me to always keep it close." Daniel felt the world spinning around him. Helen Torres had been his mother's best friend and personal assistant for over a decade. After his mother's death, Helen had left abruptly, claiming she needed a fresh start. His father had been furious about her sudden departure, especially since she had access to many of his mother's personal belongings. "I'm sorry about your parents," Daniel said sincerely. Though his mind was reeling with implications, "Mrs. Torres sounds like a wonderful woman." "She is," Emma smiled warmly. "She works 3 jobs to help pay for my art school tuition. I try to contribute by working at the auto shop and tutoring kids in math, but things are still tight. Helen always says that good people find ways to help each other. Which is why I stopped to help you tonight." The irony wasn't lost on Daniel. Here was this girl, struggling financially while wearing a locket worth more than most people's cars, offering help to a billionaire who could buy her entire neighborhood. Yet she had no idea who he was or what the jewelry around her neck truly represented. "Can I give you a ride somewhere?" Daniel offered, though his car was obviously not going anywhere. "I mean, I can call for a car service." Emma shook her head. "I live just a few blocks away." I was walking home from my evening shift at the coffee shop when I saw you here. She glanced at the expensive car and then at his soaked designer clothes. Are you sure you'll be okay? This isn't exactly the safest neighborhood at night. Daniel almost laughed at the concern in her voice. He owned half the buildings in this area, though clearly Emma didn't recognize him. I'll be fine. Thank you for your help, Emma. Really? She smiled and started to walk away, then turned back. The engine should be cool enough to fix in about 20 minutes. Just reconnect that hose tightly. Add some water to the radiator if you have it. You should be able to drive to a proper mechanic. But don't push it too hard. As Emma disappeared into the rainy night, Daniel stood alone with his thoughts. The encounter had lasted less than 15 minutes, but it had turned his world upside down. Not only had he met someone who seemed genuinely kind and unpretentious, but she was connected to his past in a way that demanded investigation. He pulled out his phone and was relieved to see he had signal again. His first call was to his personal driver to pick him up. His second was to Marcus Webb, a private investigator he occasionally employed for sensitive matters. Marcus, I need you to look into someone for me. Emma Chen, probably early 20s art student in Seattle. She was adopted by Helen Torres about 12 years ago. Daniel paused, staring at where Emma had vanished into the darkness. And Marcus, this is urgent. I need everything you can find by tomorrow morning. As he waited for his driver, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Emma's genuine smile, her willingness to help a stranger, and most importantly, the locket that connected her to the most painful loss of his life. He had built his fortune by making calculated decisions and strategic moves. But something about this encounter felt different. It felt like fate. The Lamborghini would need professional repairs. But Daniel realized he had found something far more valuable than a functioning car tonight. He had found a mystery that might finally provide answers about his mother's last days, and perhaps he had found someone who could remind him what it felt like to connect with another person, without the barrier of his wealth and status. Tomorrow, he would learn more about Emma Chen and Mrs. Helen Torres. Tonight, he would dream about kind brown eyes and a gold locket that held secrets from his past. The rain began to lighten as his driver arrived. But Daniel knew that the storm in his life was just beginning. The next morning arrived, gray and drizzling. Matching Daniel's restless mood, he had barely slept, his mind churning with questions about Emma and the locket. By 8 a.m., he was pacing his penthouse office on the 40th floor of the NovaTech building. Waiting for Marcus Webb's call, his assistant knocked and entered with his usual morning coffee. Mr. Rivers, you have the board meeting at 10, lunch with the Samsung representatives at noon, and the charity gala planning committee at 3. Daniel waved him off. Cancel everything after 11. Something urgent has come up. The phone rang precisely at 9:30. Marcus never kept him waiting. Daniel, I have the information you requested. Marcus's gravelly voice came through the speaker. Emma Chen, 24 years old, art student at Seattle University. Parents died in a car crash when she was 12. She was placed with Helen Torres through a private arrangement, not the usual foster system. Daniel leaned forward. What kind of private arrangement? That's where it gets interesting. Helen Torres received a substantial monthly payment for 12 years to care for Emma. The payments came from a trust fund. But the benefactor's identity was sealed. The payment stopped on Emma's 18th birthday, along with a lump sum for college expenses. Daniel's heart pounded. How substantial are we talking about? Enough to live comfortably, but Helen Torres has been working multiple jobs anyway. Seems like she's been saving most of the money. Bank records show she's accumulated quite a nest egg over the years, but she lives very modestly. What about Helen herself? What happened after she left my father's employment? Marcus paused. This is where things get complicated, Daniel. Helen Torres didn't just leave your father's company. She was dismissed, and there were allegations of theft. Several valuable items went missing from your mother's personal collection after her death, including jewelry and family heirlooms. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. But no charges were filed? Your father chose not to pursue it legally. Helen disappeared immediately after, and the matter was dropped. But Daniel, there's something else. I found adoption records. Emma Chen wasn't just any orphan. Helen decided to help. Helen specifically requested to care for this particular child. The pieces of a puzzle were starting to form, but Daniel didn't like the picture they were creating. "Send me Helen's current address. I need to speak with her. Already on your desk. But Daniel, be careful. If Helen did take those items from your mother's estate, confronting her directly might not be the best approach." After hanging up, Daniel stared out at the Seattle skyline, his mind racing. The innocent encounter with Emma suddenly felt much more complicated. Was it really coincidence that she had been wearing his mother's locket? Or was there something more deliberate at play? By noon, Daniel found himself driving through a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Seattle. Helen Torres lived in a small but well-maintained house with a garden full of colorful flowers. As he approached the front door, he could hear voices inside. "Emma, you need to focus on your studies instead of working so many jobs." An older woman's voice said, "I've told you, we have enough money saved. But Helen, I want to contribute. You've done so much for me already." Emma's voice was unmistakable. Daniel's hand froze halfway to the doorbell. Emma was here. This conversation was about to become much more complicated than he had planned. He knocked softly, and the voices inside immediately fell silent. Footsteps approached, and the door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind but wary eyes. "Helen Torres?" Daniel asked. The woman's face went pale as she recognized him. "Daniel Rivers," she whispered. After all these years, behind Helen, Emma appeared, her eyes widening in surprise. "Daniel, what are you doing here? How did you find us?" Helen stepped back, her hands trembling slightly. "Emma, go to your room, please." "What? Helen, what's going on?" "You two know each other?" Daniel looked between the two women, seeing the fear in Helen's eyes and the confusion in Emma's. "Perhaps we should all sit down and talk." Helen reluctantly invited him in. The living room was cozy and filled with Emma's artwork. Paintings lined the walls, showing real talent and creativity. Despite the tension in the room, Daniel found himself impressed by her skill. "Helen," Daniel began carefully, "I think it's time we discussed what happened after my mother died." Emma looked back and forth between them. "Your mother?" "Helen, you never told me you knew Daniel before." Helen sat heavily in her chair, looking older than her years. "Emma, there are things about your past that I haven't told you. Things I hoped you would never need to know." "What kind of things?" Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. Helen's eyes filled with tears. "Your parents didn't just die in any car accident. Emma, your father was driving home from a meeting with Daniel's mother the night they died. It was raining heavily, just like last night, and he lost control of the car." Daniel felt the room spinning. "What meeting?" "My mother never mentioned meeting with anyone named Chen, because your mother swore me to secrecy," Helen replied. "Emma's father, David Chen, was a private investigator. Your mother had hired him to look into some irregularities in your father's business dealings. She suspected James was hiding assets and making questionable investments." Emma stood up abruptly. "You're telling me that my parents died because of some business investigation?" Helen reached for Emma's hand, but she pulled away. "Your mother, Grace Rivers, felt terrible guilt about their deaths. She blamed herself for putting them in danger. In her will, she left instructions for me to find you and ensure you were cared for. The locket was meant to be given to you when you turned 18, along with a letter explaining everything." Daniel's mind reeled with this information. "What letter? And why didn't my father know about any of this?" "Because your mother didn't trust James with the truth," Helen said quietly. "She had discovered some very disturbing things about his business practices. The letter and other documents were hidden in a safety deposit box that only I had access to." Emma sank back into her chair, her face pale. "So my entire life has been built on guilt money from a woman I never met." "No," Daniel said firmly, surprising himself with the intensity of his response. "Your life has been built on the love and care Helen has given you. My mother may have provided the means, but Helen chose to dedicate her life to raising you." Helen looked at Daniel with surprise. "I expected you to be angry with me." "Your father certainly was when he found out I had taken some of your mother's things for Emma. He accused you of theft. I suppose from his perspective, it was theft. But your mother's instructions were very clear. The locket, some photographs, and several other personal items were meant for Emma. I followed Grace's wishes, even though it cost me my reputation. Emma stood up again, pacing toward the window. This is too much. Yesterday, I was just Emma Chen, art student and part-time mechanic. Now I find out I'm connected to some wealthy family's drama. And the man I helped last night is part of it all. Daniel stood and moved toward her. Emma, none of this changes who you are. You're still the kind person who stopped to help a stranger in the rain. You're still the talented artist whose work I see all over this room. She turned to face him, tears in her eyes. But it changes everything else, doesn't it? You didn't come here by accident today. You came because of the locket. I came because I needed to understand the connection, Daniel admitted. But Emma, meeting you last night, seeing your kindness and your strength, that had nothing to do with the locket. That was just you. Helen watched the interaction between them with growing understanding. Grace always said that some meetings are meant to happen, even if they take years to unfold. Emma looked at the locket around her neck, then at Daniel. What happens now? Do I give this back to you? Do I pretend last night never happened? Daniel stepped closer to her. What I want is for you to keep the locket. My mother intended for you to have it. What I hope is that last night was just the beginning of getting to know each other, not the end. But look at us. Emma gestured between them. You're a billionaire CEO and I'm a struggling art student. We come from completely different worlds. So did my parents, Daniel said softly. My mother came from a working-class family. She met my father when she was a secretary at his company. Love doesn't care about bank accounts, Emma. Helen smiled through her tears. Your mother would have liked seeing you two together. She always believed that the best relationships are built on understanding and respect, not money and status. The afternoon had transformed all three of their lives. Secrets that had been buried for over a decade were finally in the open, and connections that seemed impossible were proving to be destiny. But as they sat together in Helen's modest living room, Daniel realized that the most important discovery wasn't about the past. It was about the future he wanted to build with the extraordinary woman who had stopped to help him in the rain outside. The gray Seattle sky was finally beginning to clear, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt like he could see a path forward that wasn't just about business success, but about something much more valuable. 3 weeks had passed since the revelations in Helen's living room, and the dynamic between Daniel, Emma, and their complicated past had begun to settle into something resembling normalcy. Daniel had been true to his word, visiting Emma regularly, but respecting her need to process everything at her own pace. On this particular Thursday evening, Emma was working late at Rodriguez's auto shop when Daniel appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing jeans and a casual sweater instead of his usual business attire. I brought peace offerings, he said with a smile. 1 caramel latte with extra foam, just how you like it. Emma looked up from under the hood of an old pickup truck, wiping her hands on a rag. Over the past few weeks, she had grown comfortable with Daniel's presence, but she still felt butterflies whenever he smiled at her like that. How did you know I'd be here so late? She asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. Helen mentioned you were helping Rodriguez catch up on some repairs before the weekend rush. I thought you might need some caffeine. Emma leaned against the workbench, studying his face. 3 weeks ago I thought you were just some rich guy with car trouble. Now I find out you're not only a billionaire, but you're also connected to my entire life story. Daniel set his coffee down and moved closer to her. Emma, I need you to know something. These past few weeks, getting to know you, spending time together, it has nothing to do with the locket or our family's history. I'm falling for you because of who you are. Emma's heart skipped a beat. They had been dancing around their growing feelings, but neither had been brave enough to say it out loud until now. Daniel, I feel the same way, but I'm scared, she admitted. What happens when your business associates find out you're dating a mechanic who lives in a tiny apartment and eats ramen noodles for dinner? Before Daniel could answer, the shop door burst open and James Rivers stormed in, his face red with anger. Emma had never met Daniel's father, but his expensive suit and imperious demeanor made his identity obvious. "So this is where you've been hiding," James said, his voice dripping with disdain as he looked around the modest auto shop. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for our family?" Daniel immediately stepped protectively in front of Emma. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Marcus Webb works for me too, son. Did you think I wouldn't find out about your little investigation?" James's eyes fixed on Emma with cold calculation. "And you must be the girl with my late wife's jewelry." Emma instinctively touched the locket at her throat. "Mr. Rivers, I can explain." "Oh, I think I understand perfectly," James continued. "Helen Torres couldn't steal enough from us the first time, so now she sent her little protege to seduce my son and get access to even more of our wealth. That's enough." Daniel's voice was dangerously quiet. "You will not speak to Emma that way." James laughed bitterly. "Wake up, Daniel. This girl and her guardian are con artists. Helen filled your mother's head with lies about me, stole valuable family heirlooms. So now they're using you to get to our money." Emma felt tears stinging her eyes, but anger was stronger than hurt. "Mr. Rivers, I never asked for any of this. I didn't even know Daniel was wealthy when I helped him fix his car. And I certainly didn't know about any connection to your family." "How convenient," James sneered. "A poor little orphan girl just happened to be wearing stolen jewelry when she encountered my son. What are the odds?" "About the same odds as you deliberately covering up your wife's investigation into your business practices," Daniel said coldly. "Yes, Dad, I know about that too." James's face went pale. "I don't know what lies Helen has been filling your head with, but your mother was sick toward the end. She became paranoid and suspicious of everyone. She was suspicious because you were embezzling from your own company and hiding assets from your partners," Daniel replied. "I've had forensic accountants going through the old records. Mom was right about everything. The shop fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead." Emma watched the confrontation between father and son. Realizing that this moment would define not just their relationship, but Daniel's entire future, James straightened his tie, attempting to regain his composure. "Daniel, you're making a mistake that will cost you everything. Our investors, our board members, they expect a certain standard. They won't accept a daughter-in-law who changes oil for a living. Then maybe I need new investors," Daniel said firmly. "Dad, I've spent my entire adult life trying to live up to your expectations. Building the company you wanted, marrying the women you approved of, but none of it made me happy." Emma felt her heart breaking as she listened. She knew what Daniel's choice would cost him. She couldn't let him sacrifice his empire for her. "Daniel, maybe your father is right," she said quietly. "Maybe we should think about this more carefully." Both men turned to look at her, and Daniel's expression filled with panic. "Emma, no. Don't let him get into your head." "I'm not," she said, stepping closer to Daniel and taking his hands in hers. "But I want to make sure you understand what you're choosing. If you choose me, it won't be easy. People will judge us. They'll say I'm only with you for your money. I don't care what they say," Emma smiled through her tears. "I know you don't, but I need you to be absolutely certain, because once you make this choice, I'm never letting you go." Daniel's face broke into the most genuine smile she had ever seen. Without caring about his father's presence or the grease on Emma's hands, he pulled her close and kissed her deeply. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," he whispered against her lips. James Rivers watched his son's defiance with a mixture of rage and resignation. "You're throwing away everything we've built." "No, Dad," Daniel replied, his arms still around Emma. "I'm finally building something that matters. Something Mom would have been proud of." He turned to Emma, his eyes full of love and determination. "Emma Chen, will you marry me?" Emma's eyes widened in shock. "Daniel, are you serious?" "We've only known each other for 3 weeks. I've known you my whole life," he said softly. "I just didn't know I was looking for you until I found you, through the shop window." Rodriguez and several customers had gathered to watch the drama unfold. Emma looked around at the audience, then at James Rivers' disapproving face, and finally at Daniel's hopeful expression. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you." The crowd outside erupted in cheers and applause. James Rivers shook his head in disgust and stormed out, But Daniel and Emma barely noticed. They were too busy planning a future that would bridge their two worlds. 6 months later, Daniel and Emma were married in Helen's backyard garden, surrounded by friends from both of their lives. Rodriguez was Daniel's best man. While Helen walked Emma down the aisle wearing a new dress that Daniel had insisted on buying for her, James Rivers didn't attend the wedding. But he sent a brief note congratulating them and expressing hope that they would be happy together. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Daniel restructured his company to include community, outreach programs, and scholarships for underprivileged students. Emma finished her art degree and opened a gallery that featured work by local artists. They split their time between Daniel's penthouse and a modest house they bought in Emma's old neighborhood. The gold locket remained around Emma's neck, no longer a symbol of secrets and guilt, but a reminder that love can emerge from the most unexpected circumstances. Helen often said that Grace Rivers would have been delighted to know that her final act of kindness had brought together two people who were meant to find each other on quiet evenings. When Daniel and Emma sat together in their garden, watching the sunset over Seattle, they would talk about how a broken-down car and a chance encounter in the rain had changed both of their lives forever. They had learned that true love isn't about money or status or family expectations. It's about finding someone who sees the best in you and chooses to build a life with you. No matter what obstacles stand in the way, sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the simplest acts of kindness. And sometimes the greatest treasures are found not in vaults or safety deposit boxes, but in the hearts of people brave enough to love without conditions. Their story became a testament to the truth that when love is real, it conquers all. The end.